You're listening to Trucking Tomorrow, your go-to podcast for exploring and understanding the future of trucking from a carrier's perspective. In each episode, we sit down with industry veterans to discuss what it takes to grow your trucking company in today's world. So let's hit the road with Trucking Tomorrow. Here's your host, Brian Jones.
All right, welcome to Trucking Tomorrow. I'm your host, Brian Jones. I'm joined today by Eric Sauer, the president of the California Trucking Association. He has a long and storied history with the organization. So, Eric, thanks for joining us on the show today.
Hey, Brian, thanks for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. Well, just kicking us off, can you tell me a little bit about the CTA? I know some folks might be very familiar with it, more than they even prefer just to share. But what do you guys do? What's your focus? What's your mandate as an organization?
Sure. So I'm CEO of the California Trucking Association. What the CTA is a state trucking association. So when a lot of people ask, what does an association do? I like to kind of compare it to a chamber. So we're like the Chamber of Commerce for trucking companies that operate in California. We've been around since we're celebrating our 91st year of being around in existence. And, we are the largest state trucking association in the nation. And we provide what, most people join organizations like ours for, which is advocacy, protect them from government regulations, making sure that we're allowing our members to operate and thrive and continue to operate business in California. And, in California, it's a tough task. It's no secret. So we're pretty busy. But the focus of our organization is the advocacy and representation, but also offering trucking companies compliance information, benefits and services. We're looking at, also improving and expanding a small fleet program, building on that, providing the smaller fleets that maybe don't have the staff or personnel in place to handle the HR, handle the purchasing, compliance, making it a lot easier for companies to be able to access that information. So, a lot of information. We do a lot of driver betterment programs, which I just love being around these, the truck driving championships, the recognition of drivers. We have a driver of the month program, which recognizes the best drivers that, the safest drivers for the months in a calendar year, fleet safety. So, a lot of focus on safety, but also, recognizing what an important role drivers play in this industry. And not a lot of people, they don't get the respect that they deserve. They have the truck driving appreciation week, and, a week is a little too short. Maybe we should do it a little bit more often throughout the year, but, without trucks, the economy stops. And essentially the association, what we do is, the focus is pretty much on the advocacy and representing our members the best we can.
Awesome. And I know a lot of the state associations have similar structures, and there's some parallels and knowledge sharing around that. Could you just share how the association is structured today, both in terms of how you engage with fleets, and then how you provide resources from you mentioned the small fleet program, and then how advocacy works? Like, how does that work in practice? Like, what's the machinery in place?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have levels of governance within the association. So we have a board of directors, then we have an executive committee, which is, can act on behalf of the board of directors. Yep. Then we have an officers council that's comprised of members that are going up in the leadership to become president, chairman of the board, and whatnot. So those are the three levels of governance that I always encourage members who are a member, get involved, get in those roles, and start having, more of an impact and input on what we do. We take our direction from the board or the executive committee. And that process flows through what we call the policy committees. So we have an environmental policy committee, a highway policy committee, a safety policy committee, and then we have our grassroots committee, which is what we call the Kingpin Committee. Yeah. And that's where we kind of engage on, prioritizing advocacy, doing events for who we should do events for, and talking all things political. And so through that kind of funnels up to the board, and the decisions or recommendations on whether it's a legislative proposal, a regulatory proposal, those have to go through a process that our board ultimately has the decision. Staff makes the recommendation, board makes the decision. But I always encourage members when they join right off the bat is, hey, get involved. Like, you have a vote. Every member that's in the policy committee or on the policy committee, they have a vote. And, just continue that progression to becoming a leader. And, when it comes to talking about proposals and voting on those, we haven't really had to go through this process of identifying a position and then having them support this recommendation and go onto the board, because quite frankly, we've had to deal with so much of that in California over the last, I'd probably say 15, 16 years. We likely have a position on something already, and it's usually an opposition. So it's kind of a slam dunk getting through the process. But I always want to encourage members, no matter how big your fleet is, large or small, you have a vote, and take advantage of being a member of a trade association. You invest in that, and you invest in it to get the information, you invest in it to, be involved and take advantage of it. There's always those opportunities. And I strongly encourage anybody to, that's operating a trucking company, not in California, but say Iowa or Florida or, any other state, be a member of that association, because they're looking out for you, and they're your voice, and they need your support, and you should be supporting the state that you're operating in. So you're in the know and you get the information. And you mentioned, how do they get the information? Well, things have changed significantly since I started here, which was back in 2001. We used to rely on fax. So we'd blast out fax information to our members, and they'd get the information from that, or we would have these updates at these geographical units. So we have units throughout the state. Most other associations call them chapters. We call them units. And so that would be where you got your information. You'd come to the meeting, member would stand up and read from the fax the information, and that's how you got your information. And it's, I always like to tell the story, like, change is hard. I remember when we stopped doing the faxing of information to members, you would have thought that we were trying to blow up stuff, because they got so upset with us going away from the faxes, but it just wasn't cost effective anymore. And that's when the emails started coming online, and now you're going through virtual meetings and all that. So there's a lot of different ways to get the information out there. I think now more than ever, you have multiple venues to get that information, make it easier, and making sure that you're in the know. But that's kind of in a nutshell how we, the process for us, how members are involved, and how we kind of prioritize our, I guess you want to call, marching orders.
Very cool. Well, I know you mentioned you've been with the association since, I think, 2001, and you've kind of come up through government affairs and spent a lot of time on that side before stepping into your current role. Would love to hear what drew you to this work. This is a very unique position that you're in, being, in the state of California, and also kind of the, folks that you're partnering with and the advocacy you do. So what brought you into this? What's your story behind connecting here?
Yeah. So it's interesting. I love telling this type of, or providing this type of information and background. I've always been intrigued with the trucking industry. As a little kid, I remember the first time I was really exposed to being by big trucks was my mom's friend was in a relationship with an executive at Viking Freight Systems, which got purchased by FedEx, but was a very large regional carrier back in the day. And I think I was like 9 years old, and she had invited my mom and I to come to their truck rodeo. And so I went to this truck rodeo, and I was just blown away. Like, I was already a big BJ and the Bear fan, and, the movie Convoy, all the 70s genre. I thought trucks were just the coolest thing ever. So now I'm actually next to these trucks that are operating in these competitions. And so drivers would let me climb aboard and check it out. So I've always been really interested in the trucking industry. And, through college, I worked, at a few jobs going to Sac when I was at Sac State. And when I was working, I met a female coworker of mine, became friends, and she had told me that her sister um, just got promoted at the California Trucking Association as senior vice president. She was looking for a ledge analyst.
Yeah.
And my major in college was political science. So, it was like, there's a little translation there with government and, being with a trade association. So I interviewed, got the job, and have been here ever since. Um, my boss who gave me my shot, she's still in the industry. She does, she's been working for some other organizations and whatnot. And still keep in close contact. It's Stephanie Williams, just a great friend of mine. If it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be here. But she kind of stepped me on the path, and then just kind of worked my way around. It was always mostly in the government affairs arena, working on policy and regulatory issues, providing witness testimony or information at the Capitol and whatnot.
Mhm.
We have contract lobbyists that we utilize, but that was my background. And I've just kind of, I guess, put my head down, worked, and just worked hard. And I know it's, people say, yeah, the old adage, but I'm a firm believer in that. And I just, you work for, what I really appreciate what I do, and being here so long is representing just such a fantastic industry. The mom and pop companies, you're seeing a slow exodus, maybe in California a little bit faster than elsewhere, but these are the family run companies. And I've always just appreciated what the trucking industry does. They're job creators, job providers. I mean, look at the stats. 1 in 17 of Californians are in a trucking industry related job. That's huge. And, they move the economy, and that's, they're very, they're salt of the earth people. They like hard work. They appreciate when people are doing, hard work for them. And so that's kind of my, background and where I started, and, just, I'm still here. So when I got promoted CEO, the running joke was they didn't know what to do with me. So they just said, yeah, throw him up here. He's been here so long. But no, obviously it was more than that, but it's just representing these members has just it's been an honor to, lead this organization and just be involved with it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've heard a mentor of mine who said some organizations just stay there long enough and you get the top job because you just
Yeah,
been there.
pretty much. Yeah, that's, and hey, there were some people that moved on, and I kind of, rose up and kind of went lateral and vertical and whatnot. So it is what it is. And that's what happened.
Awesome. Well, I know I get questions a lot also living in California, working in trucking, just about how the policy agenda gets shaped in our state. And it's in some ways a black box, in some ways it's very out in the open. And would love to hear in your words, like obviously you're in a unique position, how you think about influencing policy versus just educating, providing resources and information, advocacy. Like, how do you view your role in that within the state of California?
Yeah, great question. It's baked into providing advocacy and representation for your members. And a layer of that is making sure that you are educating lawmakers
Mhm.
and, regulators, and making them understand, like, we did leading up to and after the promulgation and ultimately the approval of the Advanced Clean Fleet Rule. We went out and we do these member tours. So we take them to member facilities, and we take elected officials, and we take them around, and we let them, kind of get a dose of reality and let them know, like, hey, this just is, these are the issues with the rule. This is what the impact it's going to be. And so that's always constant. You always want, as an organization, that's part of one of the main, legs of the stool that you have to solidify and make sure you're doing, is you're educating. And so it's education is huge for making sure that they're at least aware of it. And in California, I hate to say it, but, it seems to be a thumb on the scale a lot of times. But if you can sit there and allow for decision makers to have that pause for thought and maybe question what type of impact this is going to have, that's pretty critical. Ultimately, you want them to vote a certain way, but we know how things are in California. It's very agenda driven. A lot of these policies are unrealistic. They're unachievable. But you have to fight and continue to represent your members. And that's what, I think we pride ourselves on is we are always going to be involved, engaged in fighting for our members, whether that's, at the Capitol and that's through, advocacy at the Capitol, meeting with legislators, educating with them, or ultimately, unfortunately, we've had to do this a few times over the last few years, litigating on just over egregious regulations that are just, borderline illegal, possibly illegal, but also just unrealistic that just aren't going to work. And, I'm old fashioned. I kind of like the days of common sense approach and, making sure that things work and let's kind of work to get there. Unfortunately, that's just a little bit different in California.
Yeah. Well, I know the ACF rules and regs are a hot topic for anyone in the trucking world, and they have been for years. I know you've probably, again, have had a unique seat at that table, and would love to just hear a little bit of your journey through that, right? Whether it was some interesting facts and education prior to the rollout of that, what specifically you did, or what data you gathered about that. And then on the back end, after those have kind of rolled out and, arguably with very mixed success, if you could say that, again, what that, post rollout engagement and whether it's litigation or other information or what's that journey look like for you? Because you've had a unique seat at that table, somewhat end to end, I can imagine.
Yeah. So our journey began, I would say, probably maybe 10 years ago on this.
Mhm.
And I got to really tip my hat and to Chris Shimoda, who is our senior vice president. He's been with the organization. We've been, working together he just celebrated his 17 years here. He's been involved in this for 10 years and, the development, the promulgation, and he's been updating our members every policy committee meeting for the last 10 years. This is coming. This is coming. This is coming. This is coming. The sad thing is, and what a lot of people, the general public doesn't realize is that the industry is already subject to the strictest emissions rule in the nation. So we had the on-road truck and bus rule a little over a decade before. And so trucking companies spend billions of dollars to comply with the cleanest burning diesel engines in the nation. And, you had members that, or companies that had to dig in then, and now they're going to have to dig in like exponentially a lot more because the technology is so much more expensive. And so that's kind of the starting point, was updating our members, educating them, making sure that they're aware that this is coming. And we've been engaged since then, and we put together a working group. And so the working group comprised of a lot of the national large carriers, a lot of these carriers that are demonstrating or piloting this technology. And also we included, smaller and medium-sized members in it. And, we go over the rule, come up with possible alternatives and suggestions. And I believe that the group did present a alternative to CARB. And I don't think they even responded to it. And it's when you have these companies that are investing in the technology and are in a position to utilize and deploy this technology, and they're telling you that there's no way we can meet these standards, then who in their right mind or what company is going to be able to do that? And it's ironic. And I always use this when I talk to groups and talk to people about this. The day that this rule was released to the public was the same day that the governor went on the air and told Californians, hey, give the grid a break. Don't plug your cars in. So how ironic is that? that a rule that to cover the entire industry would take up 40% of the electrical grid in California. Yes, 40% of the electrical grid going towards the trucking industry. And it's the same day that they're saying, don't plug your cars in, give them, don't stress the grid. I think that was the first eye opener that anybody should have picked up on, that we're not ready for this, not even close. And I think people really realize that. I heard on Joe Rogan, he mentioned that it was 3 days later. No, it was the same day that the governor said, don't plug in, which was the same day as the rule being released, which, hey, if it was me, I would have said, hey, announce that 2 days from now, or even the next day. Don't do it the same day, but not I didn't do that. But yeah, so the rule got adopted. Obviously problematic in the sense for them on getting it actually implemented, because they weren't granted the waiver. And so, we've been working on a litigation strategy leading up to the board vote. Let's be honest, we knew it was rubber stamped, it was going to go through. So it's not like we waited. We've been working this for years. And we filed, I believe it was October 16th of 2023. And the first compliance phase of the rule was 2024, January 1st, where the drayage folks were the first ones in the poker game. And so we were able to get, I believe we came to an agreement on they weren't going to be enforcing it until the waiver was granted. And that happened right before 2024. I believe it was, the agreement was in place, December 27th. So since that time, CARB hasn't been able to enforce it. But it's not just, issues with the expense, the weight, the infrastructure and all of these things. And I think for the general public is they need a better education on what this actually means, because, voters sound like a good idea. I'm going to vote for it. That's how usually people vote, or they go party line or whatever. But on something like this, there's so many layers that you got to peel back, and you got to understand that how much are these trucks? Okay, well, the technology, let's start there. They're $400,000 to $500,000. So that's a problem. Usually the industry is able to pass on, their increase their rates with their customers by passing that through to their customers, who then passes it through to us. And I don't think the general public realizes that the industry can't absorb these types of costs. There'd be no trucking companies around. It's just absurd for people to think that. And so you have a lot of these big Fortune 500 or Fortune, 1000 or whatever companies that are they're not able to allow for increasing the transportation costs. So it's kind of, how is this going to get, funded? How are companies going to be able to operate under this? But then you talk about the weight and the battery. The bigger the battery, the heavier the weight is. And in California, nationwide, it's an 80,000 pound gross vehicle operating weight. So you say the battery is rumored to be 6,000 to 8,000 pounds. That's an additional 6,000 to 8,000 pounds that goes on that truck, which reduces their payload capacity. So then you start saying, oh, okay, well, what does that mean? Does that mean more trucks? Well, yes, because the truck that was able to do it with one truck, or the company that was able to do it with one truck, is now being asked to do it for two, just to accommodate the weight. And then California, the issues with the additional weight and on California bridges. And I think there was a report that was out there that Caltrans put together, that I think it was like 233 bridges, and I may be off, so don't quote me on this, but it was a pretty large number of bridges could not handle the additional weight, which means that then trucks would be restricted from traveling. So then that just shrinks the network for these trucks to be able to make deliveries, get on the routes and, move beyond. So then you have that, you have the weight issue. And then the infrastructure is one that not a lot of people are familiar with, general public, but the cost of putting the infrastructure in and the wait time on that. And, you're looking at months
Yeah.
of planning and red tape, and the cost for one charging station, I think, is like 120,000 or something like that. So there's all these factors that just paint this dire picture of this flawed proposal, and it's doomed for failure. I mean, it's not, how many charging stations are in California? I mean, we have over, I think, how many trucks subject to the rule that operate in California? I think it might be 1 million. So I don't see the network to charge these trucks. And, just the timing of getting those put in, the location, it's a recipe for disaster. It's what I call, fantasy land. And, yeah, it's just in its current form, it's just extremely flawed. And I understand, I mentioned it earlier. I know that this is where it's going. The industry is going towards EV. Companies want to do their part, but let's make it a little bit more reasonable. Let the market dictate itself. Let this technology kind of work the kinks out. This isn't, it's not a knock on the technology. It's getting better and better. It's just, it's not ready for prime time under CARB's rule.
Yeah. So I guess there's some practical realities for a lot of smaller mid-sized fleets, especially today, that don't have deep pockets or resources. So what are you seeing small and mid-sized fleets doing to prepare themselves? Like, what are the strategies they're taking given the uncertainty and the compliance concerns, but also the need to just keep trucks running? Like, what do you actually see boots on the ground doing today, given the unknowns currently?
Well, you hear it's a wide range of responses from folks. They say they're just going to keep on trucking. Others say they'll shut down and move on. Others, it's has to be some sort of, has to work for them.
Mhm.
Is the technology ready for them? Are the vehicles ready for them? Is the infrastructure ready for them? We do a lot of education and outreach with our members, not only on this rule, but, a lot of different rules. We have quarterly government affairs updates that cover all the full gamut of, proposals, regulations, and, we give them compliance information and whatnot. And that's built on our policy committee. So there's many opportunities for our members to get this information.
Yeah.
But stay in the know. We try our best, and we only reach, we have over 1,000 members, trucking companies as CTA members. There's 223,000 trucking companies or companies that deliver in California. So we reach a very small portion of that. I would love to have them all as members. That'd be great, but that's just not realistic. So we do our best to, push the information out. Social media is very key and critical on getting the information out. But, a lot of a lot of these trucking companies, they're not going to be ready for it. And they're probably just going to shut down, or they're going to wait till, their trucks, their useful life is done and just get out of it, and then others, you can't ignore the business opportunity in California. And I'm asked this quite a lot. Are companies just folding up shop and leaving California? They're not going to, operate in California and whatnot. And, some will, some do. But you can't ignore the millions and millions of customers that are in California. I mean, it's just a huge opportunity, and it's being able to navigate through these things. And if you're able to comply and you're in a position to purchase the equipment, the infrastructure, there's a lot of unknowns there, but I do think, the market will kind of transition more and more over the years as more and more, or as the technology gets better and it's cheaper and whatnot. But again, like I said before, it's in its current form. This rule is just, it's a disaster, and not a lot of trucking companies are going to be able to all trucking companies basically can't comply with it in its current form. So that's kind of what we're seeing with the industry, and the outreach, and, a lot of those trucking companies out there is just give them the information, make sure that they're aware, and, also kind of pop the chest out, let them know that we're fighting for you guys. We're suing on the rule. That is the biggest, what to anybody, is if you go to court. And that's what we're doing. We're doing that because this rule is just completely out of bounds, a lot of issues with it, and we're fighting for our members in the industry.
Awesome. Well, you talked about, you have a fraction of the total delivery or trucking companies in California that are currently members. We'd love to just hear how and why folks should get involved, right? If a lot of our audience are small to mid-sized fleets, may not all be based in California, but they have a state association. What does getting involved look like? What would you recommend to them?
Yeah, I would, again, it'd be nice if all, trucking companies were just, we had a way to hook them in. A lot of them don't know about it. A lot of them don't know what we do. When I hear that from either members or members that are thinking about leaving, and they say they don't know what we do or they don't see value, I literally will pick up the phone and call them, and I walk them through. And I've been fortunate enough to be around here for a long time to be able to talk about what we do. Again, we provide representation, whether that's in litigation or at the Capitol. That's why probably 90%, maybe more, of businesses join trade associations, is they want to have someone looking out for them. And I would put our organization up against any other organization when it comes to representation. But also, you're looking at it from smaller issues. Say it's a route issue that they're having, or there's permit issues for extra legal load, transportation permit issues. We address those. Terminal access routes. We address those. Business license taxes, when they're being assessed a fee that should be absolved from providing their motor carrier permit. A lot of local jurisdictions are looking for how to shake out more money, and they start going after, trucking companies for stuff that maybe they don't fully understand, that you can't do this. And so that's where we get engaged. But, when I first started here, the evolution of issues has just completely grown, and you're not talking just grown in complicated issues, but expensive issues, cost. And so when I first started here, it was DMV hasn't sent me back my registrations or my IFTA information, credentials and whatnot. So I need help with that. So delays. Caltrans delays on the transportation permits, or even this one, the CHP is ticketing my guys. They're doing it because they don't like me. Well, you're probably breaking the law, but it was just like, those were the issues. And then it came in to environmental issues, and then it was labor issues, and now it's back to environmental. So, and these types of issues, the new ones, are extremely expensive to comply. And if you have any sort of like misclassification issues, those are expensive to, you have to get representation and whatnot. So the issues have completely changed, but there's still these pocket of issues that local or smaller fleets, smaller companies are having.
Yeah.
And if you're a member of CTA, we've likely, either been engaged in something similar, or it's something that, our team will take on and address, within reason. Obviously, it's not one of these things where we can handle and fix everything, because sometimes we can't. But chances are, if trucking company X has an issue, trucking company Y had the same issue, and we were able to get a resolution or provide them with like some sort of recommendation on how to get it solved.
Yeah. Do you have a specific example of a smaller issue that may have been a policy win? Because there's obviously these big fights, right? CARB, ACF is like this big fight. Everyone's aware of it. It's the marquee issue. And those are hard for all parties involved. But there's a lot of maybe quicker wins that are just data flowing, information getting to the right people. Would love to hear an example of that where you have had some policy wins potentially in your time at the CTA.
Sure. So, we do a lot of work with Caltrans. Um, I've actually been the chair. One of the hats I wear is I'm chair of the Transportation Permit Advisory Council, which is represents trucking companies that need a heavy haul or a transportation permit to move heavy equipment.
Mm,
And over the years, we've been able to work with Caltrans and the California Highway Patrol on expediting Caltrans's process. Now, there's still issues. We're working with them on trying to get them to move to an automated transportation system, which they said many years ago that they would be. But since that time, we've been able to um, make a lot of their other policies kind of condense it, make it more efficient. Um, these are ongoing, with DMV over the years. We enjoy a really great relationship with the Highway Patrol, DMV, Caltrans, and believe it or not, CAR staff. We have a great working relationship with them. Um, but that's what it's all about, and that's the thing. Another thing on the, providing services to your members is access. And
mm,
access is key. And if you have access to high level regulatory agency representation or representatives, that's great. That gives you a seat at the table to talk about these issues. And, one of the things that I've told my team over the years is, you know, work with these agencies. We're partners in this and educate them, work with them on these issues. Don't burn bridges, blow it up, just try and do the best you can on working something out. And, sometimes it doesn't work out, but at least you're getting the information out there and you're trying to help your members. But access is key. And that's, where a company off the streets is going to go, oh, I have this issue. I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. And if it leads to like meetings with the highway patrol, that's where we enjoy this relationship with them, where we can meet with them, because chances are if it's affecting one company, it's affecting other companies. And so you want to make sure that, you're kind of addressing those types of issues before they blow up. But DMV, we've worked with them on streamlining a lot of their processes and functions. The California Highway Patrol, we worked with them on the major revisions on the formerly known as the biennial inspection of terminals, the BIP program. Now it's called the basic inspection of terminals. We worked with them on that, on some significant changes, made it a lot more efficient and manageable without compromising safety, obviously. But just,
mm,
a lot of, with legislative proposals, working with legislators on amending bills that, are not as egregious as they were when they were originally introduced into print, or amending the bills to kind of not have anything that's overzealous in them. And that's
mhm.
ongoing. Every year in California, I say, the state introduces over 3,000 brilliant ideas, and we have to monitor those. And not all of them have anything to do with the trucking industry, but a lot of them do. And it's either an impact to their customers or the warehouse or, the shippers and whatnot, which then, have a direct impact on our members. So we're always reviewing all the bills that are being introduced and prioritize ones that are going to have a huge impact or a minimal impact. And that's our marching orders for that legislative session, is addressing those bills that we've tagged as having an impact to the industry.
Awesome.
Another little item that might, a lot of people, roundabouts. The roundabouts, like a lot of people, including myself, you pull up to one, you're like, okay, what do I do? Well, the trucking industry, a lot of truckers, I received calls that they would just pull over because they didn't know if they could go through them. And so the education was not there on
Yeah.
educating the industry on how to navigate through this. And yes, you can. And so we were able to work with the DMV on implementing that in the commercial driver handbook. But also for heavy hauls, they would plan these roundabouts where these routes for them was the only route within a 100-mile area. So you take that route out, then they're detoured 130 miles, and that's just not efficient. So we've been working with Caltrans to make sure that we're involved in the planning process where they
Mhm.
take our input on, hey, we're thinking about putting a roundabout here for safety purposes. We'd like your input on, this is going to accommodate them. How can we accommodate these types of vehicles? Is there an adequate alternative route within, a certain mile distance? So it's a lot of that stuff. It's ongoing. I mean, we could spend hours talking about these things, but it's the trucking industry and there's always stuff going on.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of issues that are just about practical collaboration, right? There's some big ticket policy items, but then there's also just, hey, we need to work together to find the best solution for all involved.
And that's what you would hope happens. But unfortunately, especially in California, that's not the case. And so you have to dig in a little bit more and kind of be a little bit more engaged on these things that maybe aren't that you could come to a positive resolution rather than having an adversarial role on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where I think different issues have different approaches, right? Some of these are more straightforward, some of them are potentially more contentious, and that's kind of the unique seat you guys sit at the table. As we're kind of wrapping up here, we're called Trucking Tomorrow, right? So as you look towards the next 1 to 3 years, outside of the ACF advocacy that I know is ongoing for you all, what are your top two to three initiatives or priorities organization wide as you look to the next 2 to 3 years?
Yeah, I think doing what we can to make sure that the industry can operate a little bit more efficiently. Congestion is huge in California. What can we do about that? The state is not into expanding capacity. So what's the plan for that? And so making sure that, we're doing what we can on the infrastructure wise, but that also plays into how we're going to pay for the infrastructure. So right now we pay, through fuel taxes that go to the roads to rehab and maintain the current infrastructure that we have. And, with the penetration of electric vehicles coming into the market and the fuel economy increasing significantly from days of past, I've got a 71 Ford Bronco. I think it gets 8 miles a gallon, but
It's a
you have
great
cars.
car.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, but they have, not my everyday car. I couldn't drive it, but, they, these cars have even trucks, like pickup trucks, the fuel economy has just increased dramatically. And so the, the, the fuel, taxes or what goes into the account is just completely going down.
Yeah.
And so the more and more you see EV vehicles coming on into the market, because I believe right now they're only paying $100 fee,
Mm.
um, you're going to see a steep decline. And that goes along with California's plan of transitioning out, um, you know, gas and diesel burning engines. So how are we going to pay for our roads? And so conceptually, they're looking at vehicle miles traveled, um, proposals, not only in California, but nationwide. I've been a member of the advisory committee, the technical advisory committee for that since 2014. It's just kind of looking at it holistically, like, what are we going to do? This is going to be a big problem. So I think you're going to see a lot more engagement in the next few years on how are we going to pay for these roads if we're seeing more and more EVs coming into the market. And, they're looking at these proposals. And I always, like to say that right now, the system is so easy. You pull up to your gas station, which is located at almost every other street corner, it seems like.
Yeah.
And you sit there for 10 minutes or more or less, and you fill up the car, boom, you go on your way. General public doesn't know that's how you're paying for your roads. Right there at the
Mm.
pump. That's seamless. Vehicle miles traveled or miles traveled proposals are a little bit more difficult than that. There's administrative fees that are going into it. The state doesn't have a good track record on managing those administrative costs. It increased the consumer's fee into that. And so, it's these types of, privacy concerns and whatnot, tracking of mileage and whatnot. But also the ease of being able to charge your car. And if it's not that easy and it's longer, like, if you're taking, on the slow charger, it takes hours. Well, imagine how long it's going to take for a truck with a huge battery. That's be a stranded asset that's just sitting there, and it's not, when the wheels aren't moving, they're not making money. And so that's a big issue. So, I think those are the types of things is like, hey, the energy infrastructure for California, regardless of what goes on with the ACF, that's always going to have to be planned and worked on. And so you either tie it to, like with the road charge and the issues associated with that and the mandates for electric vehicles, it all is going to be funneled in together because you're going to have more of an infrastructure to accommodate those things as they phase out the gas burning vehicles. So, those are probably two of the biggest, I don't want to say two of the biggest challenges, but just, I would think that, in the coming years we're going to have to really keep an eye on those and be engaged. But again, you never know with this wild card of a legislature, what proposals are they going to come out with. So, we're always going to be engaged in that.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned this earlier, like there's transition happening. And when there's transitions, you need to figure out, okay, what does the new system look like? How does that work? And there's just work to be done to sort through that. Right. So, that's where there's going to be many job security for you guys in the coming years, like you could say.
Yeah. And more gray hair and, headaches from bashing your head in the wall for going, God, why are they doing this? But yeah, you're correct. I've heard that a lot over the years, like, hey, it's job security for you. And I like to look at them when they say that, I go, do you realize how stressful these things are? Like just to kind of decipher what they're trying to do and then kind of go to battle on these things. It's, job security, but it's more like insanity sometimes.
Well, that is a great note to end on here, Eric.
I guess so. Yeah.
But as good as any. So appreciate you coming on, taking the time on your busy Friday here. Great to connect. And thanks for joining the show.
Yeah. Thank you. Have a good holiday season.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Trucking Tomorrow. The show notes include links to any resources mentioned in today's show. And if you enjoyed our podcast, please subscribe so you never miss an episode and leave us a 5-star review.
Truck base, you're always tough.